What's going on, everyone? It's Jeff with Burmese Pythons. So tonight I'm going to start my little mini breeding segments, the little videos I'm going to be putting together on answering some of the questions about what I do to breed. We're going to start off with like preparation and when I start breeding, or what I do in order to get my animals ready for breeding. I think that's most important, to make sure that you have healthy, mature adults that are ready to breed, and what you got to do to kind of stimulate the breeding season and when it all happens. But first, I have to take some boys out of their enclosures. They're in with girls right now. I'm going to go through and feed a couple of the girls, and then we're going to get started on what it takes to breed these animals. Got a nice albino green boy here. He was became a dad last year during breeding season. Of course, the man himself, my boy, the albino pied Burm. He became a dad for the first time last year. Made some awesome hets. We have him in with a couple girls this year as well. Saw some confirmed locks. We'll go over all that stuff when we get to that part of the breeding videos. Let's get this guy back in his cage. All right, so we got the boys back in. We're gonna do some feeding now. Get some of these girls fed, see if they keep taking meals. Again, that's something that we'll talk about when we cross that kind of time, about what I do during breeding season as far as feeding. We'll see if these girls end up taking these frozen thawed rats. No problem. My girl. How cool is that? The girls are still taking food. Okay, so I'm going to start with the breeding 101. this is going to be part one. I guess we can start with what you're going to need. Obviously, a mature adult male and female Burmese Python. I hear a lot of people say go by size, go by weight, length. I like to do the 3-year rule. I start breeding my girls when they are 3 years old. I've had maidens that were 3 years old that have never bred before that laid me 19, and I think the other clutch was like 21 or 22 eggs. Perfectly fertile, beautiful, big, robust Burm eggs. It was awesome. I was nervous because I always heard that their first year there can be complications. They could slug out. Fortunately, their first year, I never dealt with that. That being said, I have dealt with that. Last year was my first year. I had a lot of infertile eggs. But I think I figured out why. Again, you need mature adults. I would say 3 years old. If you feed your female Burm correctly, by 3 years old, she should be mature, ready to breed. Her reproductive organs should be there. They should be built up. They should be healthy. I know guys that will power feed their animals and breed them in 18 months, 2 years. I've never done it. I've heard people be successful doing that, and I've heard horror stories. I just like to play it safe. 3 years, it seems to work for me. Again, everything that I'm telling you today is what has worked for me. All right, so male, female, mature animals, start off with that. Going into, let's say you have those two things, keep them apart. I do not cohab. I see people cohab and they accidentally get clutches, or their boa lays a bunch of babies or something. Do not keep your animals together if you do not plan on breeding. I've never done it. I know some people keep them together and they love each other. They are not really lovey-dovey animals. Obviously we love them. I love this little baby female pied Burm, but keep them separate. Put them together only if you are willing and wanting to breed them. All right, so I would say, my season starts right after I get a clutch of eggs. So you want to get your female back on food. And even if it's the first time you're breeding, you want to get your female eating. I'm a big Brian Barczyk fan. Food in, production out. My girls eat heavy during the summer months. It's pretty much like balking season. You want to give them all the nutrients that they need leading up to the breeding season. I keep my males a little leaner. It keeps them more active. It keeps them, you don't want a big, fat, lazy male. So my females in the summer, I feed heavy, really heavy. All right, so I even made notes so I don't forget nothing. I would say around September. So this room that I am in is 85 degrees. It's ambient. That is controlled right now with a little space heater. But naturally, when the outdoor temperatures drop, the temperature in this room drops. I personally do not drop my hot spots at all, because if that snake, that female, wants that warmth, I want them to be able to have it. I'm not willing to, the ambient room temperature drops, and if I lower their heat source, I don't want to run a risk of a respiratory infection. If they need to warm themselves up, I want them to have the opportunity to do that. If they need to cool, they surely can do that as well and go to the other side of the cage. That being said, right around, I would say the end of September, early October, I see my females, a lot of them, starting to hug that cool side. They're still eating. They're just not hugging that hot spot. They're going to that cool side. They're starting to build follicles. They're cooling down. They know what to do. These animals, this is what, they know how to breed. They know what their body needs, what they need. So that's usually in October. I see my females going to the cool side of the cage. Once that starts happening, I lower their food intake a little bit. I go from feeding, my big females like large rabbits. I back them down to maybe bunnies or guinea pigs or jumbo rats. I kind of start backing the food down. I'm still keeping it there, but I'm not balking at this point. These girls are starting to cool down. They're starting to build follicles, and eventually, when they do start breeding, they will stop eating. It's religious. Every year it happens. You breed, you feed, and the girls stop eating. There's a good podcast out there. Tom Reagan did an interview, and I kind of followed that podcast when I started. And one of the big things that stood out to me is he says he will stop feeding his females just so there's not a risk of like impaction, like if she's full of eggs and there's a urate that blocks things up. He tells a really good story about that and why he stops feeding. So I kind of follow that rule. I don't completely stop until they stop, but I do kind of shrink their meal size. Instead of the big rabbits that I'm using for balking during the summer and stuff, I back down to smaller meals like rats and guinea pigs and things like that. Okay, so once they hug their cold side and I'm starting to put boys in, we're going to talk about good signs and bad signs. A great sign, you put a male in there and that female lays there and lets him kind of check her out and do his thing, and you'll see his spurs going and he'll kind of be courting her and stuff. That's great. This year, I had a lot of rejections. End of October, I put a male in with one of my females just to kind of see where they were at because they were hugging that cool side. And if you see a female, it's almost immediately lift her tail up and you hear gargling and she defecates all over him and does a little poop, pee. She's not ready. And she will do that every single time until she is ready and she is receptive. So I would say middle of November was the first lock that I saw. So my girls were rejecting. I tried once, twice, maybe 3 times, different females, and they would all reject the males. So I highlighted and wrote down November. November seems to be the middle to the end of November is when I start seeing my first action. I had a lot of locks in the middle of November. In the end, that's what I shoot for. Usually right after Thanksgiving is prime time. Get those boys in with the females. I would say that's my most successful time, and they will breed until she ovulates. She's done. She won't breed anymore. What else? So I went over temps, food, what you're looking for when you put them together. I'm going to try to keep this short. I want to go over light cycles real quick. I darken my room. I have a shade over the window so there's natural light. I darken the room. I give them privacy. It kind of kicks them into that breeding mode. As soon as the room starts kind of naturally cooling, like the ambient temperature, I pull that shade down over the blinds and it lets a little light in, but it's pretty dark in here most of the time. That's what works for me. I don't have big bulbs blowing on these snakes all the time. I don't have the windows open with all the sunlight. Now in the summer, yes, natural sunlight. The sun comes up behind you guys in the east and goes around, so it's like perfect natural sunlight. But I would say when they start hugging that cool side and this room starts coming down in temperature a little bit, I pull that shade down, I give them privacy, darkness, and it really seems to kind of kick things off. Yeah, so the big thing is feed your girls, get them to size, 3 years old. You don't have to, but it's what works for me. I've never had a problem with a 3-year-old breeding. So feed, let that ambient room temperature come down a little bit. I don't recommend dropping the hot spot. Maybe a degree or two if that's what you want to do to kind of try to kick things off a little faster. But I like to leave that up to them. If they need to get off that hot spot or away from their heat panel, they can go to the other side and cool. I want that heat there for them to kind of be able to thermoregulate. If they want to be warm, they can be warm. If they want to be cool, they can be cool. And you know, sometimes I see them laying in the middle. So yeah, just kind of follow that. It's not rocket science, it's not hard, but food, kind of make the room dark, let that ambient room temperature come down, leave the hot spots on, guys. The last thing you want to do is, you know, come in one day, you drop your hot spot, your ambient room temperature came down, and all of a sudden you hear wheezing or seeing bubbles in their mouth, or that would not be good, because if you have one snake, that's it. Like, your breeding season's done at that point. You got to treat the animal. You can't be putting your male in with her, because then he can get it, or whatever, vice versa. The boys, the boys have one thing on their mind: breeding. I would say right around when this room started dropping, my boys started pushing. I actually can't believe they're not doing it now, but they just got, you know, they were pulled out of the cages earlier. But the boys, they stopped eating already. They don't want nothing to do. I actually had them out 3 days ago. They were in their own enclosures, and 3 boys, 1, 2, 3 here, they were actually wrapped around with their tails up over their water bowls like they were breeding their water bowls. That is how fired up they are. They're ready to go. I guarantee tomorrow morning I'll come in here and they'll be pushing out their glass. I just pulled them out. I give them 3-4 days off. Maybe try to offer them a meal. They have not been eating for me. So yeah, that's what I do to start. It's a little guide. I wish I could talk all day about it, honestly. This is kind of like, you know, breeding Burmese Pythons 101, breeding them, just trying to get a good idea of how to start, or if you want to start. And I do want to do a video on if you should. Maybe after this breeding season I'll do a couple more videos on stuff like that. But anyway, thank you. If you have any questions, comment, like, just look up Burm Donor on Instagram. It's at _Burm Donor. DM me. I'm just a normal guy. Like, I'll write back to you. I can talk about snakes all the time. I've exchanged phone numbers with people, met a lot of awesome people that helped me. I helped a lot of people, so reach out, subscribe. The most important thing, support USARK. Get on and support USARK. I realized the other day I made a short little video about what I'm going to be doing in these videos, and I did not say that, and I was kind of ticked off at myself. So I want to use this platform. These animals are, you know, it's a privilege to have these. It's, you know, it's our right, it is, and we love these animals and we don't want to lose them. So go support USARK, check it out, sign up, you get a shirt. If you have a ball python, do it. If you have a leopard gecko, do it. If you have 500 snakes, do it. Like, that's where it's at. That's what keeps us going. That's why we're allowed to do what we do with these animals. So thank you guys. Check me out on Instagram at @Burm Donor. Thank you. Share this video. Hopefully this helps you. Hopefully it answered your questions, and if it doesn't, reach out to me, please. Thank you guys. Burm on. Check this little baby out. That's the goal right there, folks. Have a good one, guys. Burm on.